Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Board Explorer Live. I'm Richard Vobes. This is the afternoon stream in which we read books, old books, and usually if we can get them out of print or unknown or little read. And today we are continuing with our In Search of England, which I noticed that Sean says, because of how excellent the reading was yesterday and the book itself, I've gone and bought 5 different titles of Morton books arriving this weekend. Pleased to have discovered original editions. Fantastic. For a moment there, I thought you meant you'd bought 5 copies of the same book. So that's quite bizarre. Hello to Ben Reed. Hello to JW. Hello to Turbo Stream. Hello to Michael Angel. And hello to Julia Hartley. Oh yes, wrong channel. Where's Ed? She wonders. They'll be here. What is it? It's only 4:01 now, and thank you very much for coming along. We will continue with. We're still only on chapter 1. Jamie Boy 1995 has turned up. Hello to you. Very kind of you to pop by. Right, so we're going to carry on with our reading. We left off on chapter 1, as I say, and I can't remember exactly where he was. Somewhere in Hampshire. He'd been to Winchester, hadn't he? Yes. Sorry, just trying to find out where I was. Ed Loud, hello, loud and clear. Morton there, hello. Superb. So here we go. I went to see the great hall of the Castle of Winchester, all now left of the royal palace. Didn't I read that before? Yes, I think I read all that bit. Yes, that's right. Sorry, I'm on part 7 of this chapter. And he went in favour. What? King Arthur, sitting crowned in the Tudor robes. A point in favour of the legend is that it's quite large. Oh, yes, he's talking about the table, the round table, large enough to seat the king and his 24 knights. He was standing in the choir of Winchester Cathedral, surrounded by the first tourists of the year. He was a clean-shaven man with the mobile face of an actor, shrewd, humorous eyes, and white hair brushed straight back over his head. I learned afterwards that he was well known in America. Vergers, as a class, are not likeable. The profession of verging appears to induce mousy manners and complete ignorance of history. When I saw the verger of the Cathedral of the Kings of Wessex, I edged up to the group miserably, thinking, I must write something about the balderdash these fellows hand out like cold muffins. In 2 minutes, I had discovered that the man was alive. Flash is alive! He had imagination, magnetism. He had a real sense of history and a good technique. He threw out ground bait and then began from the beginning and built up. A fat, middle-aged motorist who I judged had been too busy making money all his life to be more than 8 years old in other things, stood gaping on the edge of the crowd. He seemed to be struggling reluctantly with a new point of view. "This chap's good," he whispered. "Isn't he? I expect he's been pulling our legs a bit. He talks about the old days as if he's been there." As the man with the white hair talked in the silent choir of Winchester, before him the long sweep of that marvellous nave, on either side of those lovely Norman transepts soaked in a pale gold light, he moved his hands in time with his words, and his eyes went over the group. And here the printing on the page has gone a bit funny. I can't work out what to each listener. There we are. Sorry, there's a bit of a... You know, sometimes in paper you get like a little bit of a wedge or something, or a fly's got into the paper when it was manufactured and then printed on. You still can't read it. That was what that was. There was not a shuffle. He had them gripped. They had come prepared to be bored. They stayed strangely thrilled by this man's enthusiasm and by the pictures he called up. That was it. He humanized the history book. We saw, as he talked, down a long tunnel of time, the kings of Wessex riding through a country that was not yet England. We saw the longboats of the pirates pointed to our shores. We saw the Roman cities desolate on their hills, darkness and fighting. We saw the monk from Rome come walking over English meadows, St. Augustine preaching beside the pagan wells, bringing the cross from Rome again, telling the world's greatest story to king, to noble, to common man. So the seed of all cathedrals was sown. The speaker then rebuilt Winchester stone by stone, the old story, like all old stories, told properly, took on a new importance, became dramatic and somehow near at hand. The crowd had heard it before at school, but they had never seen it before. "Who's coming up the roof with me?" said the verger. "Come on. You'll have the treat of your lives, and on the way I'll let you walk up where the monks walk." Just getting a sense of this. "And on the way I'll let you walk where the monks walked, who day and night guarded the golden shrine of St. Swithin, which once stood where you are standing." Up the spiral staircase we went, holding on to ropes, feeling the smooth face of the stone in the dark, till we came to a dim, dusty tunnel crossed by a narrow wooden platform. We were walking above the lovely vaulted nave of Winchester. Above the roof and crossways stretched vast oak beams that hold up the structure. "Just look at them," he said. 800 years old and as good as new. The architect, who was here the other day, says that all they need is a little lead treatment, and those giant oaks were felled by the Normans. Come on, mind your heads." We came to that eerie spot where the great bells of Winchester tick off time so patiently, and here this amusing verger lined us up, solemn elderly women, fat men, thin men, and little children, gave each one of us a bell, delivered a lecture on bell ringing, numbered us off from the right, and pointing to each one in turn as he wished them to ring, drew forth from the unpromising assembly, "Abide with me." We were delighted with ourselves. Up we went again, and round, till we bent under a little stone doorway and came out onto the roof of the cathedral. Below us lay London's old rival, Winchester. We looked down on the tops of feathery lime trees, on the river and the distant hills, the little town lying pleasantly in a blue haze of smoke from its chimneys. Winchester. "I love it," said the verger. "You ought to come up here on a moonlit night and look down. You can imagine things. You can see ghosts." "You must," I said, "have devoted your life to this." "When I was appointed verger, the spirit of Winchester gripped me, and I knew that I had found the right job. I love every stone of this cathedral." "Who are your most intelligent listeners?" I asked him. "American women, over 40, he replied instantly. Down we all trod, over the sheer corkscrew stairs, and out into the lime avenue. We found that we all knew each other, and we all shook hands before we parted. Such is the power of one man's enthusiasm. I was walking between Compton and Winchester in the morning when I came upon a tattered old man sitting by the side of the road. He was, he told me, looking for odd jobs. But there was something about his personality which told me that if an odd job showed itself, he would look keenly enough, but in the opposite direction. He had the slow, steady slouch of the tramp. He told me that he had once lived in Hounslow, but beyond that he was not giving anything away, the secret of his life. I could get nothing out of him. I discovered by touching on safe current topics that he knew literally nothing of events. His hazy opinions of the world were gathering from pieces of newspaper in which people sometimes gave him food. When we came to the outskirts of Winchester, he caught sight of another shabby figure ahead and began to hurry. "Oh, I don't want to miss my beer," he mumbled. "Your beer?" I said. "You can't get a beer now. It's not yet 10 o'clock. "I can get a beer all right," he told me, "as long as those blinking—" He was a nasty-mouthed old man. "Don't swill it down first." We came to a lane which led to the Itchin, and at the end of the lane was a lovely grey gatehouse leading to a courtyard, beyond which stood a second gateway, framing a gracious picture of green trees and old grey stone buildings, rather like the Charter House. Round the porter's hatchway at this second gate were 2 or 3 seedy-looking men, drinking out of horn mugs and eating dry white bread. My unpleasant friend hurried up, pushed through the group, rapped on the door, which was opened by an aged porter, and said, "Give me the Wayfarer's dole." Immediately the porter handed out a hornful of ale and a big slice of white bread. "Won't you offer me the Wayfarer's dole?" I asked. The porter put his head out. "We never offer the Wayfarer's dole," he replied. "You have to ask for it." "Well, please, give me the Wayfarer's dole." Promptly appeared his hand, holding a horn of ale and a slice of bread. I went in through the gateway to the hospital of St. Cross. If souls in heaven gain any pleasure from looking through the golden bars to earth, men like old Thomas Sutton, who planted the Charter House in Smithfield, and men like that much more distant, philanthropic Bishop Henry de Blois, the grandson of William the Conqueror, who planted this hospice of St. Cross in Hampshire, must feel an overwhelming happiness. The seed has grown and borne fruit century after century. Time, which wrecks the greatest monuments, has left such works unchanged, good deeds still shredding kindness in the world. In the year 1136, Henry de Blois founded the Hospital of St. Cross to shelter 13 poor men, feeble and so reduced in strength that they can hardly or with difficulty support themselves without another's aid. They were to be provided with garments and beds suitable to their infirmities, good wheaten bread daily of the weight of 5 marks, and 3 dishes at dinner and 1 at supper, suitable to the day, and drink of foodstuff. The hospital was also to give food and drink to poor wanderers who came to its gates. This had been going on for 790 years. The hospital still retains its ancient charter and its buildings. The poor brethren of St. Cross are still sheltered by the ancient walls. The poor men still come from the King's Highway and are not refused. St. Cross is the oldest almshouse in England. Such places are so steeped in the peace of unhurried years that they seem out of the world. You feel that worries of life have ceased at the gates. On the west side of the lawn stands the houses of the brethren, distinguished by tall chimneys, each house containing, like those of the Carthusians even, 2 rooms, a pantry and a garden. Over the smooth grass, in the shadow of the gracious grey stones, walk ancient brethren of St. Cross, each one in a long gown with a silver cross worn on his breast. When a brother dies, his silver cross is cut from his gown and placed on a red velvet cushion, which is placed over his heart in the coffin. Then it's removed, and the master of the cross fastens it on the gown of the next brother, thus admitting him into the hospital. "There's a waiting list as long as your arms," said a smiling old brother. That's the wrong sort of voice. "There's a waiting list as long as your arm," said a smiling old brother. "We are very lucky to end our days here. Would you care to see the church?" We went into one of the finest transition Norman churches I have ever seen. A calm, majestic, splendidly proportioned church, with great stone columns down the nave, vast as a giant oak trunk. When the church was first restored recently, traces of colour were found on the stones, and this colour has been renewed. The church is a mass of geometric patterns in red and blue and yellow. It was painted in 1866, and the colours used reproduce those discovered beneath the limewash, which at the time covered the church. Few people, so the brother told me, like this colouring, but I do. It has brought the church to life in an amazing way. There is nothing cold or unclothed about it. The Brethren's Hall, where for centuries old men have eaten their mortrel of wastel and milk, or herring pie, and sometimes plum broth, not forgetting, of course, the gallons of small beer, is a building which dignifies the word charity. A study of charity through the ages is a good subject for a man with taste to write about, and in this hall we are in touch with an age which gave nobly and gladly. Side by side with hideous cruelty and callousness exists this pious love for the poor of Christ. There is a raised hearth in the centre of the hall, round which the brethren gathered at a charcoal fire. At one end of the room is a delicious gallery in which the minstrels play on great occasions. When passing through the gateway on my way out, I stopped to talk to the porter about the wayfarer's dole. "Every day," he said, "we give away 2 gallons of beer and 2 loaves of bread, divided into 32 portions. It's just a snack, but a very old one, for it goes back over 700 years. About 30 wayfarers, mostly tramps who appreciate the horn of ale, receive the dole each day." In the lane I met a tramp hurrying along with an anxious face. "It's all right," I shouted. "You're in time." And I thought what a strange sight it would be could one assemble all the men, and the women too, who have hurried down that lane with empty stomachs in nearly 8 centuries of wayfaring. Just going to pause there for a moment, see how you're all doing. Good afternoon to Edward Moulding. Richard's output is prodigious. It takes quite a bit of time to keeping up with everything. Oh, I do beg your pardon about that. I'm so sorry. I was thinking of doing about 5 more shows a day just to, annoy people. I don't think I do enough. Hello to Trevor's Travels by Narrowboat, Turbo Stream, Lee Lawson. Thank you, Lee, for the pictures of the dust jacket, by the way. I do need to grab those pictures and put them on the thumbnail, because I think that will improve the thumbnail no end. I might do that. I've got to do some editing as soon as I finish this, so that we have a video for tomorrow. Linda Kane, good afternoon. Late, forgot the time listening to the Any podcast. Well, any old podcast will do. Morton says, oh, yeah, we've read that one. I get that I met a few bells in Winchester. I get that. I've met a few bells in Winchester. Have you indeed? Mark Donny McLeod. Certainly is this morning. So watched his video when I got and realised I hadn't listened to the podcast. There's so much to catch up with, isn't there? Oh dear, oh dear. Abide With Me was my mum's favourite hymn and was sung at her funeral service, says Stephen Ruff. I can't bring the tune to my mind. Trev's narrowboat thing says, hearing the mention of the River Itchen, I wonder if the Winchester Canal is still in use, running by the Itchen. Actually, that would be interesting to go and have a look. I have walked past it a couple of years ago when I did some videos around Winchester and up on St. Catherine's Hill with Nick Tan, the Music Man. Lee Lawson says, we were change ringing, not tunes, different bells, I suppose. I guess the beer was safe than the water when the tradition started, said Ed Loud. Yes, of course, beer because they boiled it. Whereas they could have just boiled and let the water cool down. But I guess if you're going to boil water, you may as well make it alcoholic. Afternoon, sorry I'm late, no problem. Audrey, must have been memorable ringing in such a place. Absolutely. So there we go. Right, cool. Caught up more or less. Sorry not to hear that. Oh dear, JW, sorry to hear that. What's this? Thanks for doing these readings, Richard. I do hope... I lost my brother to COVID yesterday and... my dad's still in the hospital with it. Oh, gosh. Well, what can one say? I'm really sorry to hear that. I hope that it was painless for him. Obviously, it's painful for everybody else. And, really sorry to hear that. I hope you managed to cope. It's very difficult. But, of course, I will carry on doing this if it helps to take people's mind off some of the terrible... that was the whole purpose of the reading in the first place. When we all got locked down, we had nothing to do. And I just thought, what can I do to help alleviate people's pain? Oh, I know, I'll read to them. And then most people wrote back and said, Richard, you reading to us has given us more grief and pain now than ever before, especially if you read the story of a Norfolk farm. Please read it. And give us more pain. Right, we'll carry on. It's interesting. I'm enjoying this, actually. I did read a little bit of this to myself beforehand a while ago. And I thought to myself, when I read it quietly to myself, not out loud, I thought, it's a bit twee, isn't it? Nobody will want to listen to this. But actually, when you read it out loud, it seems to take on a different life. Anyway, let's carry on. I was bowling down the hill, thinking not of women, but of spare wheels, when I found myself heading for a small stone bridge on which a girl was leaning, gazing like... I wish they wouldn't to break up the words like this, because now I can't get the sense of, what is it? Melisande? Melisande? I don't know who that is. Into the water. Gazing like Melisande in the water. Who's Melisande? Must be a famous person out of fiction. Maybe out of Shakespeare. Who knows? Anyway, on the steep slope of the bridge, a small but stubborn motor car had coughed, sighed, and stopped. Now, I must explain to you that it was a magic morning. The rain had ceased, the sun was warm, the trees were well furnished with singing birds. It's always good to have a well-furnished tree with singing birds. And a rich, gentle happiness lay smoothly all over the world. A rich, gentle... Do you know, today, the rich, gentle happiness. What a lovely turn of phrase. Today, as I go on my walk, the rich, gentle happiness lay smoothly over the world. I wondered, in the second at my disposal, what to do. If, I argued, that girl happened to be leaning over the bridge because she liked watching the water go past, would she consider me impertinent if I offered to help her on the assumption that her car broke down? You've got to be careful with women that ask you impertinent questions. You really do. Oh, no, it's him asking her impertinent questions. Well, you've got to worry more then. If, on the other hand, I argued that her car... If I, on the other hand, I argued her car had really broken down and she was hating the water as it went past, she might hate me if I also went past. She would certainly consider me a bore. Fortunately, I had no time to decide whether it was better to be considered impertinent or boorish, for the girl, in the amazing way women have of settling life's little uncertainties, stepped into the middle of the road and held up her hand just like a policeman. I stopped. She smiled. I smiled. She smiled again. I cut off the engine and I raised my hat. 9 months later, we were in a hospital, and she was in the maternity... No, sorry. Could you, she said, flickering her eyes in the way that she knew was fascinating and probably had practised in a mirror, could you lend me a hand? Could you lend me half a pint of petrol? Could you lend me half a pint of petrol? She was distinctly charming, especially when she flickered. She was wearing a small brown hat into which a diamante arrow had been shot by an unerring Bond Street jeweller. She was neat as a doe and rather deer-like in a brown tweed costume with speckly stockings ending in brogues. A tight string of small pearls was around her neck and her blouse was tangerine in colour. Given us a lot of detail there to be hanging on to, hasn't he? As soon as she asked for half a pint of petrol, I was immensely relieved. I was relieved, as most knights-errant were, I'm sure, in the days of the older romance, when, on examining the maidens in distress, they saw no trace behind of her of a large unpleasant dragon, but was requested merely to free a skirt from a bramble or chase away a toad. Sorry, I haven't read that very well. You see, I visualised the dragon. I see myself plunged into the entrails of that small but stubborn car, pretending, for such, under the woman's eyes, is the terrible vanity of man to be a mechanic, blundering around the interior with a careless and ignorant spanner, and probably cutting myself, losing my temper, swearing, and doing something quite serious and expensive to that small but stubborn machine. But half a pint of petrol? I could not lend you half a pint of petrol, I said sternly, and she said, "Oh," just as I wanted her to. But, I continued, I could, and I will, give you 2 gallons of petrol. When I had said this, it seemed to me, looking at her, that 2 gallons was a miserable quantity. I should have said, how does it go? 2 pints, 1 quart, 4 quarts, 1 gallon, 9 gallons, 1 firkin, 18 gallons, 1 kilderkin, 36 gallons, 1 barrel. I should have said, allow me to give you a barrel of it, at least, or I have a long way to go, a mere firkin. However, as I clambered over the side, feeling rather paltry, I heard her say, "Oh, but really, I couldn't." I looked at her. "Really?" she said, and those eyes flickered 3 times. "I couldn't accept it. I really couldn't." And I knew that she could, and that she would. So I unlimbered the tin and advanced on the bonnet of the small bath-like car. "Honestly, I can't accept it, you know," she said. A thrush joined in. "Silly ass, silly ass, silly ass," it said. "Hear that?" "What?" she said. "The bird. You must let me pay for it." "Nonsense," I replied, and gurgle went the 2 gallons into the small but thirsty car. The deed was done. She had been to a point, I think, because there was a shooting stick in the car. How much is petrol?" she asked, flicker, groping in a bag. "I honestly forget." "Oh, but do tell me." I wanted to say, Lady, the essence of chivalry is the joy of performing a service for an entire sex. Your sex, of course, because had you been a man, I would have called you a glaring ass to have travelled on a dry tank and would have charged you double. Also, had you have worn spectacles, been spotty, or possessed rabbit teeth or legs like a Norman knave, I would have still, with almost the same alacrity, can't pronounce that word, given you the 2 gallons of petrol. The fact that you are utterly delicious and can flicker your eyes so charmingly adds pleasure without altering the ethics of the act. But what I really said was, forget it, please do. It's nothing, really. It's too sweet of you, she said, with a flickering, closing the bag. What I wanted to say then, with a bow, was, Lady, I do not wish you to feel under any obligation to me. Neither am I a garage, so I will not take the money from you. But it has been a privilege since chivalry elevated you to the pinnacle from which you try so hard now and then to descend for us to look after you. Really, it is I who am in your debt. Don't take away the warmth, unusual glow of feeling that I am really a member of the stronger sex. But what I really said was, well, are you all right? Oh, quite, thanks, she replied with a flicker. Such blue eyes. Topping day. Oh, too marvellous. Well, goodbye and good luck. Oh, bye-bye and thanks most awfully. She flickered adorably 3 times, and then the stubborn little tin bath shot over the bridge, and she was gone. I waited a while before I started off on the same road. What is romance? Surely it is just feeling that things are a little more marvellous than they are, women more beautiful, yourself braver, the grass a sharper green. Silly ass, silly ass, silly ass, said the thrush. Thank you, I whispered. That was very kind of you. And now we're on chapter 2. That was the end of chapter 1. We are now on chapter 2. How about that? Legs like a Norman knave. Yes, far too many firkin jokes now. Oh, here we go. A firkin, not a merkin. Oh, here we go. That must be 2 gallons. That must be a euphemism. Oh, she's a suffragette. Is this Mills and Boons? Yes, I think it's turned into Mills and Boons. How strange. Chapter 2, ladies and gentlemen. Chapter 2. I explore the nunnery at Romsey, watch a liner leave for America, lose myself in the New Forest, and talk about ghosts in an abbey and attend a point-to-point. Romsey, in the magic county of Hampshire, is the ideal small market town. Lord Palmerston, with bronze hair turned green by years of rain, stands importantly on a plinth in the marketplace. Probably not anymore. It's probably been pulled down, isn't it? A policeman in an easier attitude stands near him. There is a full cake shop opposite. Everything is slowed down to a reasonable pace. Men in leggings stand on the curbstone with the expressions of deep thinkers. Now and then a man and a cow cross the square. A little distance from the road, standing back among the trees, is Broadlands, a big white house that once belonged to Palmerston, and over Romsey broods a mellow restfulness, as if the place has done its bit in the 19th century politics, and is now content to retire from all kinds of passion. Overshadowing all, as in so many similar little English towns, is the weathered bulk of the great grey nunnery, built in Saxon times, destroyed by the Danes, rebuilt in 1130, and bought by the citizens of Romsey, good judges for a bargain, for £100 when Henry VIII collected the dissolution windfall. All typical of England, from Palmerston with his green head, the town constable, the cow, and the grey abbey with its feet, in the Heptarchy, whatever the Heptarchy might be. I was sitting in the churchyard rails, looking through the feathery green screen of the new elm leaves at the Norman clerestory windows, the squat grey tower, and the weathercock on which says Romney, a jackdaw perches whenever it's going to rain. That bird must be tired out, for I looked in vain for it. 3 small girls in white pinafores were nursing dolls in the graveyard. A butcher's boy in a blue pinafore cycled past with mutton, and down the elm walk there came an elderly man holding a posy of wallflowers in his hand. You don't get that? A posy of wallflowers. Isn't that just delightful? We talked together first of history and then of life. He was a church warden. I was surprised to learn that he is 76 years of age. There was nothing to indicate it, and his pale blue eyes showed pleasure when I told him, quite sincerely, that I would have put him down as 55. "And never a day's illness in my life," he said. "I don't feel 76. I'm happy. Perhaps that's why. I think the secret of health and of living as long as I have lived is a contented mind." "You have, of course," I said, "never had to run to catch a bus." He smiled. "It's quiet here," he replied. "Very peaceful. Nothing much ever happens. Come round the church. It's shut, really, but I can take you in." We went down the elm avenue together. Here, in the grey light reflected from old stone, in the splendid strength of Norman pillar and rounded arch — if you love Norman architecture, you must see this abbey — in this cold hush, I met a lady, the Lady Ethelfleda, the 3rd Abbess of Romsey. They tell beautiful stories about her. They say that she was so holy that, clothed only in darkness, she would steal out of the abbey and stand naked in a stream nearby, and so until she had recited the psalms of the day. That, I think, is as pretty a story as the one Coventry tells about Lady Godiva. She was rewarded as she deserved to be. One night she was reading the lesson to her nuns in church. The candle flames shook and went out, but she continued to read by a pale, soft light that shone from the tips of her fingers. That, too, is a lovely picture. It's difficult to imagine this holy lady in the grip of a financial crisis, but legend says that once, having been entrusted with a large sum of money, she was suddenly filled with compassion for the poor and, with brimming eyes, gave it all away, although not hers to give. When the day of settlement arrived, she fell on her knees in prayer, and lo, the empty bags filled again. Fortunate, holy Ethelfleda. One night, very near to tragedy, I missed out a complete word there. Word blind, ladies and gentlemen, word blind. One night, drama, very near to tragedy, came to Romsey. William, the Red King, who, it is well known, was a most unpleasant person, knew that if he married Edgecliffe, the beautiful Saxon princess then in the wardship of the Abbess of Romsey, he would strengthen Norman rule in England by linking the new monarchy with the old. So, one night there was a great waving of torches and a clatter of hooves on the cobbles. Up rode the Red King, ready to take the girl. The Abbess, who had no intention of giving up her ward, hurriedly dressed the princess in a nun's habit and told her to kneel at the altar. The king was received. The abbess told him that the girl whom he wished to marry had taken vows of chastity and now belonged to Christ. Through the dim colonnade he walked, and we can imagine how the knees at the altar trembled as his steps came up the nave. Pausing at the chapel, the Red King saw a young nun bent in prayer, and he walked out of the church and rode away. There is in Romsey Abbey, in a locked box, a tress of auburn hair. It was found during excavation in the year 1839 in a leaden coffin of Saxon date under the floor of the south aisle near the abbess's door. The coffin was otherwise empty, and the hair had been placed in a box of oak that rested upon a wooden stand. What, I wonder, is the story? How often a mystery like that hangs in the mind when the greatest monuments in a church have faded from remembrance. And there was I thinking he was going to say that was the girl's hair. Clearly not. Just there was this hair in a box. Fair enough. The Norman stone still stands grey and lovely in Romsey Abbey. The little whisperings and creakings that go on when an old church has shut its doors, you can fancy old memories of stirring, that you almost expect to meet Edrith, pale and trembling, or holy Ethelfleda, cloaked like Monna Vanna, going to her cold bath with a psalm book. We came out, the old warden and I, into the elm grove, very silent. It was quite jolly, wasn't it? Did you ever reckon she has to pay for her fuel? No, yes, the woman, yes, clearly she used her female charm to get fuel wherever she went. Let's do one more bit before we finish. I stood on the bar gate at Southampton and looked down over the town of Sir Bevis. It's interesting he says that because J.B. Priestley in English Journey, I seem to remember, he stood at Bar Gate. I don't know if there is still a place called Bar Gate in Southampton. Maybe someone could look that up. Bar Gate. He stood on the Bar Gate. So I'm wondering, this must be where the turnpike is, presumably. But I wonder if there's a street or an area called Bar Gate in Southampton. Anyway, I stood on the Bar Gate at Southampton and looked down over the town of Sir Bevis. It was a clear morning. There was a bustle along the narrow streets. The tram cars, I did a video interviewed a bloke about trams. The tram cars went past beneath the gate, clearing it as if by a miracle, and in the air was a richness of great ships. As I stood there trying to trace the line of an ancient wall, I thought, shall I write about the Lionheart who sailed from Southampton in 1189, or about the Speedwell or the Mayflower, which set off to found Broadway a little later, or about the last most glorious of Southampton epics, when the long troop trains came in one after the other that August night in 1914, before most people knew that the thing that was to change our lives or thoughts had happened. What a puzzle it is to write with a few words about a town in which every stone tells a story. So I went down towards the docks, still wondering and thinking about the giant Ascupart, whose painted figure rests in the bar gate with that of Sir Bevis, and about God's House, or the Hospice of St. Julian, which holds another different story. Then, on the quayside at Southampton, I came upon a little drama, the thing at the very heart of this town. An Atlantic liner lay at the dockside. It's funny, it's exactly what J.B. Priestley did. He talked about the splendid ships, didn't he? This is 20 years before, 15 years, I think, before Priestley. But Priestley talks about the liners and the impressiveness of the liners, as I recall. Over the gangway swarmed porters carrying luggage. Men shouted and cleared a space as the huge cranes swung round, lifting piles of cabin trunks. There was the throb of immense departure. Men looked at watches. Each second had its value. Smoke came from the funnels of the Mother, whose bulk was lifted above me. Deck piled on deck. The sides of this ship were like the sides of a cliff. From the high portholes gazed here and there a face like the face of a caveman looking down into a valley. Someone shouted my name from the top of the mountain. Looking up, I saw a rich man known to me. "Get a pass and come on board," he shouted. In a few minutes I was sitting in a little dove-grey boudoir like the reception room of an exceptionally famous actress, only tidier, which this man called his cabin. He had an oxidised bed. I don't know what an oxidised bed would be. A door led to a marble bathroom of the latest design, full of oxidised taps and gadgets, cold showers and hot showers. He had paid £200 for all this. "A sailor's life is a hard one," I suggested. "Pity you can't come over," he said, with an idiot disregard of time and duty which is characteristic of those unhappy people with too much money. We went on a tour of inspection down endless paint-smelling corridors. He told me how many yards along there were, but I've forgotten. We went into a vast palm lounge, into a dining room bigger than the dining room of any hotel, into a swimming pool, into a gymnasium full of electric horses, camels, rowing boats, cycles and machines designed to pummel the horrid stomachs of fat men. I would like to have interviewed Columbus in this ship. Gold lifts shot up and down. Stewards ran here and there. Dazed-looking passengers wandered about, wondering how they had taken the wrong turning and if they would ever find their way back to their cabins. My friend, who is swiftly bored, left me, and I went down and down into the bowels of this grotesque hotel. Hundreds of men and women in shabby clothes were huddled together with bundles, bags, boxes. They were like little herds of scared cattle. They were Irish, English, Jews and Italians, whose families, with all their possessions, packed in a box, setting out to make a new start in life, the steerage. There is no more heart-aching sight than this in any country. It seemed to me that the gold lounges upstairs were a crazy dream, and that here, in the unseen neglect, unthought of lower deck, I had touched the reality. Some of these people were dumb and dazed. Others were voluble and excited. No body of people could have looked less like adventurers, and yet think of this adventure of theirs, starting in a strange country, making a new beginning, taking a second throw in the gamble of life. A girl opened a paper bag and gave a sandwich to an old man, obviously her father. She put her hand round him, and he patted her hand as it lay on her shoulder. I knew that there would be hysterical laughter and tears in this place soon. A siren blew. "Visitors on shore, please. Visitors on shore. Come on now." This great ship was ready to cross the Atlantic. I met my friend near the restaurant. "I don't feel hungry," he said sadly. An orchestra was tuning up. The purser was smoothing down a ruffled woman who had, it seemed, lost a whole bathroom, which she had paid for. On the gangway stood a man and a girl, with a pale, insincere smile of parting trembling on their lips. "Goodbye," he said. "Write a bit each day and post it from New York." The siren blew again. The ship's officer shouted. The girl dabbed her eyes with a handkerchief and smiled. The young man walked down the gangway, and I knew, remembering ancient agonies, that he felt the ship to be an inhuman monster dragging him away from her, that every blast of the siren was like a burst of the devil's laughter, and that the endless miles between them began as soon as his foot touched shore. A mile or so above, her tiny white face looked down at him, and I felt sorry for the both of them. The siren laughed again with fiendish hoots, and slowly, so slowly, the ship moved with 2 tugs beneath her great bows. The inch between her and the dockside widened to a yard. From the point of view of parted lovers, she was now already in New York. The young man stood there with a white face, watching as in the slow, drawn-out agony the liner found her way inch by inch into Southampton water. Twice he tried to leave the spot, but he could not. I stood beside him, entirely in sympathy, thinking of those poor, forgotten ones and their pathetic bundles, wondering whether they were laughing, crying, or praying as the great ship moved to sea. A telegraph boy stood on the quay with his fist full of undelivered envelopes and his eyes following the liner, full of injury and resentment. He was as ridiculous as a frog feeling annoyed about a volcano. But he whistled, jumped on his bicycle, and pedalled back with a bunch of pink farewells to the grey town of goodbye, which men call Southampton. And there we will stop. He will be in Bewley tomorrow. That was quite fun, wasn't it? It's like a sort of light-hearted fizz, isn't it, really? Vintage Creative. I wish Richard would make audio of these broadcasts available so I could listen in the car while I'm working around the house. Yes, well, I suppose it's possible to extract the audio from this. Dumb interest is lagging under the Atlantic somewhere. Oh, dumb internet is lagging. I beg your pardon. The Bargate is a Grade 1 listed medieval gatehouse, says Linda Kane, in the centre of Southampton, England. Constructed in Norman times as part of the Southampton town walls, it was the main gateway to the city. Oh, yes, of course, Bargate. That was me thinking it was like a turnpike or a bar, because a turnpike, the word turnpike comes from the fact that pikes were laid across the road and they were turned up to let you pass, I seem to recall, which is very much like what we still have when you have a gate that comes up, but it was a pike, which is where the term originally comes from. But also they often called them, at the gates of the villages would be also where you might have to pay to come in. And in medieval times, of course, if you weren't from the village or what have you, you wouldn't be able to be let in, and you had to wait in if you were a merchant selling stuff, as I remember. That's it, Linda. Yes, it's an island. The traffic goes round, but doesn't it? Going to have to look it up. The Bargate is pedestrian, if my memory... Oh, is it that one that's in the middle of the shopping centre now? That you... there's a beautiful old gatehouse. That must be it. Is that the Bargate? Right in the middle of the shopping centre, you've got Primark and all those god-awful cheap shops, and you've got Woolies. Well, you haven't got Woolies now, but you probably would have had Woolies. Probably had Woolies back in his day, back then. That was the last time... If it was the last time I was there. There we go. I do remember a museum there to aircraft. I thought strange at the terminal that there was a great ocean queens were birthed. Yes, so my goodness, time passes quickly. It certainly does. Has he got all his own teeth? I think I've got some of my teeth. Ladies who prefer fatter shoes, such a euphemism. I found out the meaning from Claire Balding and Sandy Toksvik. Did you? We won't ask what that means. Yes, hair today, gone tomorrow. Thank you very much. Brilliant. Well, there we go. It's all on YouTube Vintage. Thanks, Richard. Lovely reading again. Thank you very much. Well, that's all good. We got through that without any harm. No authors were killed in the process of this recording, which is a blessed relief. Not like the other one who was stamped to a cross and rocketed into space, jettisoned. Anyway, back again tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Do the same. No Vogue show tonight, of course, and there'll be a video where the lovely Julia and I go round Whitehawk in Brighton Hill up to the racecourse, looking at the Neolithic camp, or at least trying to find it. We get spotted en route by somebody, and we walk along the racecourse pretending to be Gigi's. So, yeah, there we go. That's something to look forward to. And on Friday, I am going to meet up with Lee Dallon, who is a farmer, who's going to put the farmer's side to the monoculture and landscape, as I've called a lot of the agricultural fields now. And he's going to put his side to the story, which I'm very much looking forward to hearing and understanding. And I would like, I don't know how possible it is, it would be great to follow a farm in a year and keep going back once a month, so 12 times in a year, and see what they're doing and how they do things as seasons change and the sort of jobs they get up to appreciate really what farms do. I would love to do that. I shall try and put that to him, see if he's up for it. Not to criticise, not to mock or anything like that. It's to understand. It's that to understand. So sad to listen about the house plug your sound into your hi-fi. So to listen around the house plug, out at the house, plug your sound into the hi-fi, and there you are. Voila, there you are. Absolutely. All right. Thank you so much. Look after yourselves. I will be back soon. Till then, bye-bye.
Bye-bye, dear.
Yep, yeah, bye-bye.